This is a special presentation of the Gaming News Canada show with Steve McAllister.
Hello and welcome back to the Gaming News Canada show. I'm your host, Steve McAllister. Every week we give it the old call to try when it comes to landing the best and brightest people to speak with on this podcast to make us at least a little bit wiser. And that's certainly the case today as we welcome to the show two very dynamic women who have been catalysts for change at the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation, especially as it relates to OLG's initiatives around diversity, equity, and inclusion. They've also become highly in-demand speakers on the conference circuit, including the upcoming Canadian Gaming Summit at the Metro Toronto Convention Centre, June 18th to 20th. So without further fanfare, we say greetings to the Vice President, Community Sustainability and Social Responsibility for OLG, and recently named SBC's North America Leader of the Year 2024, Catherine Meade, and OLG's Director of Social Responsibility, Tyjondah Kerr. And Tyjondah, I feel like I'm giving you short shift here, but I just had to recognize Catherine being honored by SBC last month. Thanks. Listen, thanks so much for joining us both. Tyjondah, I think you've been on the podcast before or been with us back in the days where we did the show on LinkedIn Audio, but this is Catherine's maiden appearance on the Gaming News.
It is, yeah.
Hey, Catherine, let's just start. Like first off, belated congratulations on being honored by SBC, and you're two of the, I would say, two of the more fun people I run into at the conferences.
Thank you.
And John, I think this goes back to 2 years ago when you and I think I moderated a panel with you and Dr. Sherry Bradish at the Canadian Gaming Summit. And Catherine, you were sitting in the front row, and we should have included you as a panelist because you end up being an active participant in the panel, which is fantastic. But it's Catherine, for someone, I guess, who's at 9 years in the industry, which pales in comparison to Tyjondah. We'll get into that in a second. But just start by your thoughts on being honored by SBC last month.
Oh, well, that, and the word really is honored. I was indeed honored and kind of floored when my name was called as the winner of that award, because there were so many other pretty amazing leaders that were also shortlisted. But I really, before I even get to be sort of named the winner, it's that members of my team actually nominated me. I didn't even know it was a category. I didn't know anything, right? And so the real true honor for me was that my team thought, oh, there's this award for Leader of the Year. We're going to nominate Catherine. And then after I won, I actually saw what they said about me. And that was also really humbling, what they were able to, how they characterized me and my leadership, and the impact on the organization, and did so sufficiently persuasively that ultimately I won the award. So that was all so amazing. Then came the actual winning it. Also we happened to be a table, you might call us of stragglers, because we didn't, like a lot of people had their industry table, and the Bob McFarland from the organizing committee, he had a number of us, but a lot of us turned out to be Canadian, right? So Amanda Brewer, who you had mentioned earlier, she was at our table. Paul Burns from the Canadian Gaming Association, Shelley White from the Responsible Gambling Council, and Aaron and I, and there were a couple others. But so when I won, I really was at a table full of people who knew me. They weren't just being, oh, that's so nice that you won, ma'am, but they actually knew me, and so that really made the night even that much more special, to be sort of surrounded by really professional friends at the event, and Aaron from my team, who was involved with nominating me. So it was really amazing.
And Tyjondah, knowing you, I'm sure you had your 2 cents of input into that nomination as well.
Well, of course, I can't go left out. Catherine's the best person to be reporting into, and that award reflects everything that our team, not only myself and Aaron, but our entire team feels about her. She's incredible. So that award was so deserving. I'm just upset I wasn't there.
No,
I want to talk a bit about. I always like to hear the personal stories of people's journey in this industry, and especially as someone who's a relative newcomer to the gambling industry, and really having just had a chance over the past 3.5 years to meet people. But Tyjondah, you're far and away the veteran of this trio on the podcast today. I mean, almost 25 years at OLG and many different roles, and climbing the ladder. But maybe just talk quickly about how you got your start at OLG and what's motivated you to stay with the organization for almost a quarter of a century.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. And Steve, thanks for having me again on the podcast. I look forward to this conversation. I actually just celebrated 30 years in gaming in May. I started at Casino Windsor before it was Caesars Windsor. I started Casino Windsor in '94, and I just took a job. I needed a job to pay for school. I took a job and paid for school, and I never left, Steve. And the industry is one where it is so vast. There were so many areas to grow and use your expertise. So my degree in school was in psychology. I have a degree in psychology. And of course, all of my roles previously were in operations on the gaming floor and talking to people and socializing with people. And then when I made the jump over to OLG, I was in leadership roles the majority of the time, from supervisor on the gaming floor to currently director in social responsibility. And I've got to say that OLG is one of those inclusive organizations that allows you to grow in your career, as well as develop long-term relationships with folks, such as Catherine Meade here on the call, my best friend I met when I was working at Woodbine. And so I think there is a human connection and an alignment with my values and the organization's values that makes me want to stay and grow and continue to give back. Because I grew up at OLG. And so I think that that's my, I've made it a part of my identity, a part of who I am, a part of my family. And so it is a place where I want to stay, grow, help grow, and add value.
Catherine, I often joke to people that I've had so many jobs over my career, I've lost track of them. And I think I've more than met my match, although your career is certainly much more distinguished than I am. Someone who's been has worked as a lawyer, has run for politics and in the Maritimes. Before you joined OLG, you were the director of capital project for the 2015 Parapan Games in Toronto, highly successful venture. Again, I'm always curious, and I think when I look at my own career, you go to, in my case, you go to journalism school for 3 years, and you think, maybe one day I'll get to write for the Toronto Star and the Globe and Mail, and then next thing you know, you're doing media relations, and then the internet comes along, and you're doing social media for a nuclear generating station. But in your case, how was your career path taken you to where you are today at OLG?
So first off, it's gracious of you to call it a career path. I think it's more like a career labyrinth or something. It's very, I always say, and I do mean this, I was just chatting with someone a moment ago about careers, but, none of it is a waste, right? So I started out as I did an undergrad in phys ed and a master's in sport administration with a goal to being a director of athletics at a university. But when I was in grad school was when Ben Johnson tested positive for sport, and everything changed in sport for a while there. Like a lot of funding came out, and suddenly you needed to be a marketer, not necessarily someone with a sports background. That all switched. And at the same time, I was doing a master's in sport admin and sociology of sport, and the sociology of sport piece was looking at issues of race, gender, and class in Canada's sport delivery system. So as I shifted gears, then I ended up in what we now call the EDI space. And I was in the EDI space for 8 years, starting first with the Nova Scotia, with the Canadian Human Rights Commission, and then I moved out east to Acadia. Then I was in Nova Scotia Barristers Society, and then ultimately went to law school. If you can't beat them, join them. And then after practicing law for a while, then I've returned. I've then stepped out of the EDI, had practiced law, and then went into trying to avoid saying it, but I squeezed in that MBA, and then what that led me to was getting into roles where my legal training is of value, but also then leveraging other things. And so what I've done all along, though, while it's now been quite some time that I left EDI as something that puts food on the table, it certainly, I never ever left it. And the overwhelming majority of my volunteer work has continued without interruption, actually, regardless of whether I was doing another degree or whatever. I still kept volunteering in the space. So that's been what I've continued to do, and then so here I am at OLG in the role that I am, that pulls from a number of these areas. Certainly, you mentioned my work with the City of Toronto on the PanAm Games, and that's one that actually made it look like all along I'd been working towards this goal, that job, because it was sport. There was a legal piece in terms of negotiating a bunch of agreements. I was dealing with the capital projects. I was leveraging any and all of my training. What I find myself doing here as well, though, because I've got the community piece, and as well then the social responsibility, all of those things, right, are still areas of real passion for me. And then in terms of my volunteering at the organization, probably from within 6 months of when I started, has been in the EDI space in an assortment of ways. And now I've done a number of things, but I'm currently the executive co-chair of our Pride network, right? But there have been just, it never really stopped, and have continued to be supporting and very actively involved with whoever happens to be the DEI director. And so when Tyjondah was the DEI director, I certainly was part of hiring her and then supporting her in her role as well. And then I plucked her from that and brought her on my team. But anyhow, there we go. But yeah, so there's a lot of things in my convoluted past, eclectic past, that's what I meant to say, that have led me to that are part of what I contribute in the work that I do today, right? So
yeah, and speaking that, Tyjondah, it's been, I think, almost 5.5 years ago now since OLG introduced a 5-year strategy around equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I think just doing a bit of preparation on the OLG website for the podcast today, go back to 2021, and 43% of hired employees self-identified back then as a member of an unrepresented group at OLG. 49% of the corporation's full-time workforce and 55% of its senior executive team identified as women. Do you know where those numbers are today, and how are things progress, and the role that you and Catherine and others at OLG play in making sure that strategy keeps moving forward?
Yeah, 100%. We're really lucky because we got that leadership from the top that drives that work to make sure that those numbers increase and or stay the same. So we are still at gender parity, both in our executive teams and our leadership teams and throughout the organization. So that's a very important focus for us. And then now I think the numbers that we're trying to change is that intersectionality. We're trying to get, more. So for example, women of color identifying in the leadership roles. We want women from the 2S LGBTQI plus communities identifying. And so the push right now is to drive more employees to share their demographic information with us so that we can have that fact-based, evidence-based data to push the needle further on the more diverse we want to become as an organization. So those numbers are probably around the same, slightly more probably in our frontline staff. Will probably be, you see more diversification. You'll probably see more people self-identifying just as the company grows and gets more comfort into inclusivity and sharing diversity. But yeah, those numbers are strong and we want to continue that gender parity for sure, but looking at intersectionality of women to strengthen that diversity goal altogether.
Hey, Catherine, this may be too simple of a question, but why is it working?
Oh, I think it's working for an assortment of reasons. And Tyjondah hit the nail on the head a moment ago, is a lot of why things are working at OLG in the DEI space is because of our CEO, Duncan, and what he has messaged and has demonstrated and has expected of his C-suite and their how they demonstrate. So here's a perfect example. In 2020, so Black History Month 2020, we had no idea what was coming the next month, but anyhow, Black History Month 2020, we had a panel that Tyjondah, she wasn't in the DEI role yet, she was just as a volunteer, as we all are, but she had been involved in putting together this Black History Month. There were some panels, and there's one panel on it was those of us, the senior most Black employees, talking about our experiences both in the organization. Okay, that time. So first off, the very highest was, there was a senior director and the rest of us were directors. I was a director at that time. And in that room, 2 people higher than a director came to that event. You're hearing your own people talking about their experiences, and there were 2 people. And I'll call them out, Nancy Kennedy, and at that point she was the SVP HR, and John McFarland, who's continued in the field, but he's working with someone else right now. But they were the only 2 who came. And everyone else was director and below, mainly below. Now, like, Duncan is at everything. And if he's not, genuinely, like he was meeting with the premier, there was something, because he's there. And he's there, he's in the room, he's visible, he's there. And then as a result, almost always almost any other C-suite member is there for anything. Whether we're talking Black History Month, women's, International Women, you just name it, and they're there. And then come all the others that are there because, well, I better be there if my boss, whoever that is. And so just one thing right off the bat is just a demonstration from the very top that this is important, and we need to treat it as such, right? And then as well, and I say this all the time, but in the past we had done this. Oh, we were working on our culture as an organization, and wow, the workshops, the sessions, if you only knew, Steve, all that we went through. And then we had this placemat of our 5 strategic something or the others. I can only remember something about agility. Actually, I don't even remember that. All right, so we went through all that. And, I don't know if I don't think our culture went anywhere, but we had all these workshops. Duncan came in fall of 2020. And so for the first year, like, he was only a box, he was a face in a box. And that face in a box changed our culture dramatically in a fairly short period of time. There were no workshops. We didn't do this, we didn't do that. We just had a leader that we could believe in because he showed up. And he showed up again and again and again and again and again in a variety of contexts, including EDI. Right. And so anyhow, I just go to that. That's really, in my view, the single most important thing. And then has come people getting on board and realizing, A, it's important. And then B, wow, this was interesting. Not just I was here because my boss was, it's like, wow, I actually care. And that feeling has permeated throughout the organization.
I'd like to ask both of you about culture, and I'll start with Tyjondah. And someone who's been coached in minor sports and has also been a manager in the journalism world, and also worked in corporate environments as well. It's always fascinating when you hear the word culture, and it sounds like a word with a lot of power. I think sometimes it causes eyes to roll, but like Tyjondah, when you talk about the culture at OLG, and you referenced it at the top of the podcast, what does culture mean to you?
Oh, that's a good question. So for me, culture is very emotive. Culture is how the environment around me makes me feel, how the leaders match the values to ensure that I feel like I belong. It's the driver. Culture is the driver in terms of how we feel personally in order to be the high performing employees that we want to be. So, I think the key is that a person has to align to the culture of an organization in order to do their work well and to feel their best. And for me, the culture at OLG right now aligns with who I am. I can come into the office, be the Tyjondah that I have grown up to be and not feel, that I have to code switch or I have to censor myself in any kind of way. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm doing the best job of explaining it, but it's the work that the organization does to ensure that the individual feels a part of what is being built and feels a sense of safety while performing to their utmost. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm sure Catherine will probably riff off that a little bit.
Well, I would, but I like where you're going there, Tyjondah. But for me, I see culture as the manifestation of the values of an organization, and not the stated values, because sometimes we can talk a good game, but then you see how we treat. But it's how we really the manifestation of our values, and relatedly then how we treat each other and how we approach the work. That is it a high performing value? Is it, do we value high performance, or is it like mediocrity? Just I'm pleased to say I can't even pronounce the word. That's great. But these are but that's really it. It's that that's where our cultures show up, all right, and not the PowerPoint or whatever we do, words on the wall. Those things are all nice, but how do we really treat each other? How do we approach the work that we do? How do we approach each other? And for me, that's what our culture is. And then the knock-on effects of that are, how does that make me feel? Do I feel like I'm valued? Can I bring my whole self to work? So some of the things that Tyjondah was saying about, do I bring my whole self? Do I have to code switch? What do I have to do? Can I be out? Can I do anything and feel like I'm safe to be authentic? Are my leaders authentic? Right? Is there a valuing of authenticity? Right? Anyhow, for me, that's how I would describe culture. And these are the things that, when I was talking about, these are the markers that I feel have been impacted in our time under our recent and current CEO.
When I hear the two of you talk, it reminds me of one company I worked for where they really promoted the fact that you got free lunches every day, and they had a ping pong table in a room where you could play ping pong at lunch hour or whatever. And to me, that, again, that maybe it's because I was old. I was getting towards the end of my journalism career, but it just felt like, to me, it's what the values that you two just talked about is going to a place every day where you enjoy going to work, you enjoy collaborating with people, you feel that your voice and your experience is valued, and that the people around you are treated properly. And to me, at the end of the day, that's much more important than having a sandwich at lunch, or being able to
foosball table.
Or being able to play foosball at 4:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, people have to feel it gets very, the world's changing so much now, and a lot of the human feelings, the human people skills are what people are looking for in leadership, and that sort of humanity. And so I think people need I think people want to feel good. And I think when you create a work environment where people want to excel at the role that they do, while not having to be a different person at work, or, you know, all the things that we said earlier, I think that's what people want to do. They want to, you know, especially the new generation, they want to align to the values of the organization. They want to be able to know that they're going to their job and making an impact in society. And I think that's, for us working at OLG, we get to do that because, again, 100% of our proceeds go right back to the province, right? So we want to make sure that our employees come into work, feel included, have a sense of belonging, and that the job they're doing they have that passion and that motivation to continue performing at that high level.
Yeah. And Catherine, it seems that empathy has become a trait that's really identified now as something important within leadership. And I'm not sure that was the case 25 years ago when Tyjondah started at OLG, and people were, you know, we look at the world today, especially young people, and we see what's going on with mental health, and you know, young people seem to just have a lot more on their plate than I think I did when I started my career 3 years ago. But to me, empathy is something that is a lot more valued now.
Yeah, I would certainly agree. And I mean, it's you know, it just seems serendipitous, perhaps, that at a time where I'm more senior in my career, the leadership values, or at least the leadership values that are valued in our organization, happen to be the ones that come very naturally to me. And so being an empathetic leader, being an authentic leader, these things are really critical to me. And they form my values, and that's not gonna, like, these are bedrock values, right? And so I'm glad that things have come together as they have, and if they hadn't, I would have to be elsewhere. But because these are the things that have been critical for me, being led by others, and they are the things that, for me, I want to be very clear about, and empathy, and as I said, authenticity. You know, Tyjondah was talking earlier about you know, being able to bring one's whole self, and I referenced it too. And you know, when you talk to a number of our Olympians, because of my other world, spending some time with Olympians, and you know, to us LGBT Olympians, and athlete after athlete who said, you know, when I came out, that's when my performance shot up. So they might even have been having to field things that they didn't before, but they were able to be free and clear to be themselves. And that was a real turning point. And they were able to, just be themselves, and let the chips fall where they may in other ways, but they weren't competing with this big secret on, you know, that they were carrying, right? And so, you know, for some of us, it might not be, well, for me, it does happen to be about being out or not, but it's not everyone, not for everyone, but in their own case, it might be, and as Tyjondah was mentioning a moment ago, you know, if we're code switching or whatever we're doing, hiding whatever aspect of ourselves. So yeah, I'm obviously Black, so that part I can't hide. But there might be other aspects of who I am and what I am, and I have to feel like I have to act a certain way, have my hair a certain way, and it's all these things that end up restricting you and making it hard for you to truly excel by being fully yourself, because so much energy is being spent being something else, or performing, or whatever that is, or being in the closet, you know, whatever that thing is that stops you from being able to bring your full self and perform at your highest and best, right? Whether you're performing a sport or at work, whatever that might be, right? So this is why these things are critical in my view.
Hey, Tyjondah, I saw you wagging your finger when we started talking about empathy, so I wanted to give you a chance to weigh in on that.
You're so sweet. You know, you're good. You're good with the cues. Empathy, like, it just wasn't a thing. It was not something that we considered. We put our head down. We got the job done. That's what it was back in the day when we were started. And gaming itself, if I can be so bold, it was a white man's world when I started. And so, you know, no one even talked. We just got the job done. It was hustling. I remember we had this term that we would use, just get her done, just on the floor, it's just busy, you know, long days. And I think the world, like I said, the world is changing now. And the empathetic leader is the leader that will get the most performance out of an employee. And so, yeah, no, it did not exist 30 years ago when I started. It didn't exist when I started in OLG. I was very lucky to have certain leaders that did it very well. Like for me, I was very, very lucky in the leaders that I had and still am to this day. So I was lucky, but not all employees were that lucky to have really healthy and cognizant managers like I did. But it is more apparent now. I think people understand that an empathetic leader is a part of building a healthy workplace in order to drive high-performing teams. So I think it's a big part of what we do now.
Your comments about women in the industry, that's a perfect segue to my next question. And I read this morning there was a Q&A done by Betting Ladies founder Val Martinez. She did a Q&A with Grain Hurst, the director of corporate affairs for Entain, and Grain's been in the business a long time. And she said same thing as you, Tyjondah, that there have been strides made in the right direction, but there's still what she calls a long road ahead when it comes to diversity and, quote, unlocking the full benefits and potential of an eclectic workforce. I mean, I can't, 25 years, Tyjondah, I can't imagine some of the stuff that you had to deal with back then. And when I started covering this industry back in 2021, I remember going to the SBC Summit North America, and I was writing a column for the Toronto Star at the time and talking about women in the gambling industry. And I bumped into Chantal Cipriano. In the morning, I had to file my column, and I was kind of looking for a top of the column, and she talked about sitting at a table at the summit on the first day with a group of women, and some man walking by and making some crack about, asking if were talking about their kids back home. And, Chantal told me that story, and as a journalist, it was perfect. That gave me the top of my column to write. But for the gambling industry, that was a pretty sad reflection on this, old boys network that you referred to earlier. Mm-hmm. Are there, without naming anybody, were there examples of you, really wondering if you'd chosen the right industry to work in 25 years ago, and just how much progress we have made to where we are today? And when you and Catherine show up at the SBC Summit North America, or in June when we all get together, the Canadian Gaming Summit, how the dynamics have changed?
Lots has changed. I have to say, SBC has done a really good job too of making sure that there's diversity, not only in their panels, but in the programming. It was through SBC I learned of the lovely African Americans in Gaming organization and the Gaming Women's Network as well. I think I messed up
Global Gaming. Okay.
Global Gaming Women.
Yes.
And so, there's definitely been strides. And I think that the industry would be rather, naive if they didn't think that they had to evolve and diversify. I mean, this is a global industry, and people of color are the global majority. And it would be very wise to start talking about diversity and inclusivity and equity in order to grow the industry and sustain the industry year over year. But yeah, when I first joined, I had the best story of when I had a lot of experience, because like I said, I opened gaming in 94 in Windsor. And so when I moved to OLG, I remember I was working at Woodbine, and I had a direct manager that just would not promote me. Yes, white male. He would not promote me for the life of me. People were getting promoted, mostly men, but I got really angry when one woman in particular got promoted over me, a white woman. And I went up to my boss and I was just like, dude, I don't know what more I can do. I mean, I've been in this industry longer than most. I'm working my butt off here. Why are you not promoting me? And he had said to me, there's nothing about you. It's fine. Just keep applying. And that's just it. And I remember thinking, when I reflect on it, it was just probably his own bias, because he just didn't see Black women in leadership back then. And not that I'm making him any excuses. But at my GM at the time, because I went above him, obviously, to talk to my GM, and my GM said, listen, Tyjondah, as it stands right now, women get ahead in marketing. move to marketing and you'll see yourself move up. And he was so right. That's where I got my promotions, was throughout marketing. And so I was in marketing for 12 years at OLG in order to navigate the playing field. And from then till now, 100%, because I'm seeing, some amazing women all in operations, VPs. And like I said, I'm in the presence of greatness right now with Catherine Meade. So yeah, you're seeing the evolution 100%, and I'm glad to see it growing. And I just hope, Steve, because there is a decline in North America as it is with conversations regarding equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so as an industry, I do hope we keep it top of mind, because it's not something we can forget. It's not something that we need to that we should be putting in the backseat because of economic downturns. It is extremely important that we continue to talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion, and to diversify our industry in order to sustain it.
Yeah, I wanted to get into more of that in a second, but I do want to get Catherine's take, because as Tyjondah mentioned, it is a double whammy, Catherine, right? Being a woman of color and also being a woman, and you having worked in the legal profession, the sports industry, now the gambling industry, those appear to me, those are three industries where I think there has been a historic prejudice against women, and you've kind of been in the middle of three very prominent industries in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. Just that these things happen, but yeah, I'm a woman who happens to be Black and also happens to be openly lesbian. So the trifecta. That's
hat trick.
Yeah. But, I'm a poster child for intersectionality. But yeah, and there's been. It hasn't been without its challenges, right? But I also strongly believe if we all take our toys and go home, there will be no change, right? So we always have to keep pushing and moving forward. And if I may or may not achieve what I want to achieve, it won't be for lack of trying. But my goal then, if it's not me, hopefully something about my presence will open things up for the person behind me. Right. So that's really and that's really the way that it's been. But yeah, there for sure the challenge, the washroom line at the SBC conference last year, and it is a line of all men, which never happens, and 0 women. You can walk on. I could have walked, done cartwheels on my way in, whatever. But that just shows that we can't quite use past tense around the prevalence of men in in our field. Yet we can't quite use past tense because it's still very much a case, and that's a perfect example. Because as I said, as we know, there's never a lineup for the men. And there was a lineup for men and no lineup for women, which speaks to the proportional representation at that event, right? Gendered representation at that event. But yes, but that said, quite as Tyjondah had flagged, the number of participants aside, SBC has been really great about the panelists being more like the days of Manels are we don't see those much anymore, and certainly at that conference I haven't seen. So those days are gone, and we see representation in a variety of ways, and that's a beginning, right? And hopefully at some point between the global gaming women, African Americans, the tribal group, all of these groups will start to ultimately have an impact on the overall attendance at the conference and other events like that, not just the one.
Yes,
and in the profession, the field itself, right? So
yeah, we had Sue Schneider on the podcast a few weeks ago, and I said this to somebody to the effect of, hopefully the day's not that far away where we don't have to have an industry reception for women on the Wednesday morning, because because it's been hard for women to break those barriers in the industry, or the same thing with people from Indigenous communities, where the industry just gets together and we're all equals. That's the right way to put it. Tyjondah, you mentioned earlier just about the concern and the danger of us taking a step backward with EDI initiatives. And again, just before we, the three of us got into the studio this afternoon, I got an email from the Logic publication, and they've done a recent survey with subscribers that shows that Canadian businesses have mostly stalled on progress when it comes to EDI, and about 40% of the respondents to the survey said that either nothing has changed or DEI progress has been lost, and I'm quoting here, in their industries in recent years, after many businesses pledged to improve DEI at their organizations in response to Black Lives Matter protests. We've heard some people, and again, it seems to me to be an ignorant comment that DEI programs themselves are being called racist. Are Catherine, I'll start with you. Are we in danger of going backwards here?
Oh, well, we're always in danger. I never take anything as set in stone. Those are the very times that then things unravel. But certainly there was this time of reckoning after the murder of George Floyd. Every company put up some sort of a statement, and then a number of organizations, both in Canada and the US, beefed up, either started or beefed up their DEI program. And in some cases, though, seriously, like they got the one Black guy in accounting to be their DEI person, right? That's part of the issue. Some actually, they did actually staff up in a meaningful way, but here we are 4 years, and it turned out that it was really more of a moment of reckoning, a rather brief one, rather than any sort of something with a lasting impact. And then this is where we're separating the wheat from the chaff, right? Those who actually really are committed to and dedicated to making change, and those that were going with something that, I'm trying to think of another way to describe it, like flavor of the week, right? It was like, ooh, we better do something good. Woo, we said we did something, we hired someone. Now let's gut that program and get on to business like we really wanted to, right? And so, in CNBC, just a short while ago, it said there were a certain percentage of companies that had essentially gutted their EDI programs, right? And so it's happening on both sides of the border. I think probably it's a little bit more prevalent in the US, but it's happening more quietly here. In the US, it's happening with bravado, right? As there are a lot of companies that, you can't tell me what to do, because there's been the staggering backlash to any progress that had been made, right? And now it's like, turning around, using suddenly words like woke they're terrible, like all these things. And to the point of, and Tyjondah heard me talk about this because I'm still so shocked. But yeah, that in Florida, like there's backlash, and then there's really, I don't know what to characterize it as, that, in Florida, you cannot teachers cannot teach about slavery unless they say what a great thing it was, because when they brought these people over, they had free accommodations, they were being fed. Yeah, they had to work for it, but I mean, look what they got in exchange, right? So this is what's happening, right? So it's one thing to gut an EDI program, and that actually is one really significant thing, but like taking it that extra level and layer back, that, and also that we're now going to revise history and start a new programming and intentional right? It's all done with such intention. So yeah, boy, we had I'll just call it was a moment of reckoning before things have come back, guns a-blazing, and we almost are wishing for the way things were sort of just a little bit before George Floyd, because we've gone way past where things were at the beginning of 2020. So so I could talk about that all day, but instead I'll turn things over to Tyjondah and see if she has something to add. But
Can I just say ditto?
No, I know you're never going to be someone who just gives ditto as an answer, Tyjondah. So yeah, the floor is yours.
It's so funny, Steve. I was just having a conversation about EDI and its decline because last Saturday was the 4th anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. And I was in Washington, D.C. My son had a basketball tournament. And, you know, I mean, I'm not on social media. And so it's probably one of the reasons why I didn't see anything. But you don't see anybody talking about it anymore. And I'm in my head, I'm just like, does someone else have to die in order to make sure this is continuing to be, done? And I just think it's just ridiculous. Like, we're not talking about it. And people are blaming it on an economic downturn. I'm like, you don't need money to make sure there's equity, diversity, and inclusion in your organizations. Like, what is wrong? Like, what are you saying? You should be able to collect your data. You should be able to set targets still. You should be able to write a report on what your data is telling you. Don't tell me that's going to take away from your ROI. And so I get really passionately annoyed by the excuses that you're hearing why EDI is not a priority. And the funny thing is I don't know how many times we have to tell organizations that there is a direct relationship to your employees and their engagement and the fact that they have a sense of belonging and your productivity. You are going to, like, no one is going to be calling out of work because they're facing racism every day. You're going to have people, wanting to go to work because it's a safe, environment where they have a sense of belonging and they can perform and do their jobs. So you can't tell me that it's not important and it's not part of your overall success of your organization. So I get very frustrated when I hear all the excuses, is what I'm going to call them, as to why EDI is not a priority. And I think it's because the momentum and the passion is gone. Like, people have forgotten and just decided, I'm just going to continue to do my job. But I don't. I wrote a little couple liners on LinkedIn reminding folks, I'm like, George Floyd was murdered this day 4 years ago. What are we doing? We need to be reminded, do better, be better, keep going. And that's what I have to continue telling people. That's what reminds me to keep being an inclusive leader, is that I don't want to live in a society where I have to worry about my son, my husband, my sons, plural, sorry, or my husband, who are all Black men. I have to worry about them when they leave their house at night, or when they go jogging, or when, like, I don't want to have this worry. So there's work always to be done, because there are several inequities, not only among race, but among women, and that the intersection of women and the 2S LGBTQI plus community and people with disabilities. There is so much work to be done. Organizations need to know what their targets are, where they're trying to go, and they need to keep at it.
Yeah, and Catherine, just as someone who spends a lot of time following professional sports, I mean, you look at that industry itself, right? We still don't have a one player, one coach in the National Hockey League who's come out and announced that they're gay playing professional hockey. And that you look at that alone, that says that we still have a lot of work to do, and we can't we can't be tossing EDI aside in 2024.
Well, yeah, for sure, because we're just talking about the race aspect of EDI, but as it's John saying, there is so much more. And it's funny, when I for a while I was the co-president of the Gay and Lesbian International Sport Association, and in that role I used to speak a lot about sport and sexual orientation. And I used to, one of my shtick, I'd have a bright, nice red $50 bill, and I'd say, all right, this bill, it goes to the first person anyone who can name an openly gay male professional athlete, and my money would be safe every time. Now I can at least say, because this was a number of years ago, there's like, you could actually name one, and I used to say, listen, past or present, as long as they were out while they were playing, and it didn't matter. My money was safe all the time. I could put whatever. Yeah. But now there have been a few here and there, not hockey. There are a few football, what we call soccer players in Europe, but it is very simple. But here's the other thing. we were watching the WNBA the other day, and they were talking about so and so, and there's her beautiful wife and daughter, and I was like, wow, because I remember watching tennis in the 80s, and they were referring to Martina's partner as, oh, and her close friend and confidant.
Yes.
You know? Like, really, it'd be like Vita Mae Brown. And, oh, there she is, her close friend and confidant. And here we are saying wife and daughter and all of that. So I do acknowledge that we've come a long way, and at least acknowledging in women's sport that at least there we're getting, because for a long time there was also some like a real fear of lots of endorsements, and I have people think that like, or even that girls wouldn't even go into sport if they think like you're going to turn lesbian. This was the thing, and it was really used almost as a weapon. But we've clearly gotten. I was watching, and this was NBC. It wasn't even ESPN. It was they were carrying it was just prime time, and I thought, okay, wow, we really have made some progress. We'll know we've made dramatic progress when and there was like a momentarily NBA guy, but when there's like an NFL or NFL or CFL, quite frankly, or an NHL player or something male that comes out. There are several who have come out after. But when someone comes out while they're playing, we'll know that we really have actually truly created something that could be accurately characterized as a safe space in male professional sport. Because we don't, I know the players are there, just the numbers, they have to be there. And then the numbers who keep coming out when they're done, that also reinforces that the players are there. And then we can hope for one day someone will be referring to, oh, and there's his husband just in the back there, and with their daughter. But I do have to celebrate where we've come. At least it was some of the women's professional sport.
Yeah, and Tyjondah, I just wanted to touch quickly. I wanted to ask you about women's sports, and we know the announcement of the WNBA coming to Toronto in 2025, I believe, last week, and the women's soccer league that's coming to Canada in 2026 announced its Northern Super League branding this week. The Professional Women's Hockey League just capped just an incredible inaugural season on Tuesday or Wednesday night with Minnesota beating Boston in Game 5 Wednesday night. And it's funny. It's almost like these new sport leagues already have a league up on long established men's leagues when it comes to inclusivity. And to Catherine's point, nobody bats an eye now when they talk about Marie-Philippe Poulin and Laura Stacey being together and being engaged, and Brianne Jenner and her partner having kids, and Jana Hefford and Kathleen Koth. Jana heavily involved with the PWHL, one of the leaders of that league, having children. I mean, it does feel like those leagues, even though they're younger, are light years ahead of their male counterparts.
And you would hope that it translates, because that's where we should be going. I think that that speaks to the amount of work that we still have to do to move forward, Steve. Like, there's still work to be done, and so we have to still keep going. And yes, to Catherine's point, we've gotten this far, but we should have been this far 20 years ago.
my $50 shouldn't have been safe for as long as it was.
Yeah, your $50 shouldn't be worth $1,000 today, Catherine.
So anyway, but yes, I think that's ultimately, I mean, we have all the proof in the pudding why more conversations need to have, and we need to be a more tolerant, loving, and motivating society. I was visiting, when I was in Washington, I was visiting the Martin Luther King Jr. monument in there, and I saw on the wall, it has my favorite quote, which I will repeat, that only love will drive out hate. And so we just have to get to more kindness at the core of everything we do. And I think this world will move in the direction it's supposed to be. And that's all I got to say on the topic.
Hey, well said. I want to wrap up here and get both the answer a question here, and that's, me. I'm a aging quote white guy. What can I do to help people like both of you and others who are leaders in this EDI space? Is there some advice you can give me, or do you want to give me marching orders? Like what can I do? What can I do to help? Catherine, go ahead, Tyjondah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say you're a journalist, so this is what you need to continue doing, these conversations and weaving it in, embedding it into your conversations, whether it's about, sports in gaming, whether it's about, compliance in gaming. We have to bring it top of mind at all costs. And this is not something that is a conversation on race or on disability or on gender preference. This is a conversation on humanity. We as human beings need to be more inclusive and tolerant of one another in order for us to have a more successful workplace. And so I think for you, just as a white man with power and privilege, using your influence to drive the conversation on a consistent basis, I think that is the number one thing you can do. I always tell people, do what you can in your sphere of influence, and it'll get done if we're all moving in that same direction. So that's what I would say.
Catherine, last word to you.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing about privilege. By its very definition, you did nothing to earn it. But you also, so there wasn't, it's just, you were born with it, you got it, whatever. So also in the same way, there's nothing wrong with can't blame you for having it. So the issue isn't about some people are privileged and some people aren't. That's our reality. It's what you do with your privilege. That's the thing. Yep. Right. And so, whether it's honestly, historically back to abolitionists, whether it's men who helped the suffragettes, there's always been a need for people of called the dominant coalition, but the people in power. There's always been a need for individuals in that power group to lend a hand and be a true ally to folks. It doesn't happen any other way. I mean, you look at the March on Washington, there are a lot of white people there. It has to. We need people with privilege to think beyond themselves and to actually be good stewards of their privilege. And so whether it's not so much about what could you do, but what could other, because Tyjondah hit that. So what could other white men or men in positions of power do in the gaming industry? It's, when you're thinking about who you might mentor, who you might champion, right? I think we're, and it's hard, right? Because you gravitate to people who seem like you. You just do, right? So it's about actually, and it's when people make a decision to, I'm gonna do something differently. Who can I bring in? Who is great, that just might need a hand? And that's what will make a difference. And it's interesting, person after person after person, including the person I just had lunch with, an Asian woman who said her very first job, for some reason, it was a white man in his 60s who mentored her, and she's got her own company and she's doing very well. But Justin, who's at Penn, was talking at our conference about how he was mentored by, it was like a white man that meant, so you're gonna so what can be done? It's about really being a true ally, true champion, true change maker by thinking outside of what would naturally come and look at really how you can help others ultimately get to the place where you are today.
That's great advice from the two of you. Thank you for that. Catherine Meade is the Vice President, Community Sustainability and Social Responsibility for OLG. Tyjondah Kerr is OLG's Director of Social Responsibility. They will both be speaking at the Canadian Gaming Summit, June 18th to 20th at the Metro Toronto Convention Center. If you're going to be at the conference and you haven't had a chance to meet Tyjondah and Catherine, make sure you make a point of introducing yourselves. If you go to a panel that's involving Canadian content, they're usually sitting in there, the two loudest people in the room cheering and clapping. So, and it'll be real easy to find both of them.
I don't like that you know us so well, Steve.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head somewhat. So, thank you so much, Steve, for having us. Really,
absolutely.
Yeah, my
It's been
pleasure.
fun.
That's my pleasure. That wraps up this episode of the Gaming News Canada show. As always, you can find these podcasts at gamingnewscanada.ca and also on the various podcast platforms. Once again, we're extremely grateful to Catherine Meade and Tyjondah Kerr for joining us on the podcast today, and we look forward to seeing everybody again soon.
Woohoo!
Thank you for listening to the Gaming News Canada show. Sign up for our newsletter at gamingnewscanada.ca. Follow Steve McAllister on LinkedIn. Message Steve if you're interested in being a sponsor or featured guest.